is an American and is a dedicated peace activist, or has been for most of his life, and in recent years is a geopolitical and media analyst. And he's working at the moment on location in some quite tricky areas, such as Cyprus, Lebanon, and Syria. So he's pretty well up to speed with what happens in the media. So he's going to be looking at some of the way that media peddles its myths and some of the political propaganda, and help us to get an understanding of how we can see what's really going on behind all of that. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to Patrick Henningsen.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. This is a really special part of the world for me, Glastonbury. It's when I started my awakening process. Some of it was visiting this place and meeting some of the people here and getting into issues that maybe I couldn't comprehend 10 years before that. And it started a journey and a process, and it brought me to where I am today. I'm going to share a little bit of a glimpse into the world that I reside in, which is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week news cycle. And I'm working in what's called the alternative media. And they call it the alternative media. I don't know if that's a very good name for it, but I like to call it the alternate media, not the alternative media. And one of the things that you realize when you start looking at the news, or you start looking at, I don't want to use this derogatory term, conspiracy theories. When you start looking into these things, you start to realize something. And I think a lot of people here probably realized this a long time ago, over the course of their life, that in many ways, we are under what's called a psy-op. And psy-op is short for psychological operation. And the amazing thing about being under a psy-op is that you don't even know you're under one until that day when you become awake to the programming that's being imposed upon you. So I'm going to take you through 2 stages. I'm going to take you through identifying this psychological operation. I'll show you where to look, how it's manifested itself in the various big news stories that we've been forced to digest over the last few years. And then I'm going to show you a few case studies and how I reported them, how we deal with them. I'm going to go into language, political correct language. So hopefully, if there's anybody in here who's PC, hope I don't offend you with some of the... I'm going to use the old language and show you the new terms that have been invented and how they come to be. And then I'm going to show you the recovery, psy-op recovery, very, very important. So it's one thing to know you're under psy-op, and it's another thing to be able to recover from it. And I'm going to show you some tools towards the end of this presentation that will hopefully empower you to look at these difficult issues and these disturbing events, and rather than becoming depressed about it, you will feel hopefully more liberated about knowing what's going on. So we'll just start. Perception. It's all about perception. This is what the media does. It creates a perception. That is actually the job of the media, or at least it has been for the last 50 or 60 years. And something amazing happened that maybe the old system didn't anticipate, and it's the advent of the internet. I remember when the internet first started, nobody knew what it was. I remember I had an email account in 1993 on a Unix system at university. I had no idea how to use it. I thought, this isn't going anywhere. Just left it. It was really confusing class anyway. But lo and behold, we have this amazing access to just about everything that you want to know. Some of it good, some of it bad. And by the way, I still read the papers. Okay, I still buy, on a Sunday, I might buy 2 or 3 papers. Just because I want to know what Rupert Murdoch's saying. I want to know what the Telegraph's saying. I want to know what the Daily Mail's saying. So perception is a big part of it. Language, culture, media, events, and their narratives. Very, very important. We're going to talk about that. And consensus reality. This is a big one. Consensus reality is basically, if I'm in a group with a group of people at a dinner party or a barbecue or at work, and everybody believes one narrative about a subject, let's say 9/11. I'll take that one. It's kind of a divisive one. The consensus reality is because everybody believes it, then I'm going to be the odd man out. And I'm going to feel a little bit embarrassed. I'm going to feel the peer pressure. I definitely don't bring this subject up at family dinners, by the way. And I've done that in the past, and that didn't work too well. So I just, it's consensus reality. And the mainstream media that we get most of our perception from relies heavily on that consensus reality. And if there's a consensus, this is the way it is, then everyone's told to move along, wait for the next crisis. Social engineering. I'm sure you've heard this term before. I used to think this was an abstract term. And I've learned recently in the last few years that this is very real. This is an actual profession. This is a practice. This is a method perfected in some of the most well-known think tanks and universities around the world. And it has made its way into our society. That's why it's called social engineering. We want to be able to identify when we see social engineering. Very important. I'm going to start off here. This is kind of like the Arab Spring. Everybody saw the Arab Spring a couple years ago. And that was fueled by the Twitter revolution. So really this is a great illustration. Sometimes an illustration can say more than I could say in hours and read in a book. They've managed to give us the feeling that through these color revolutions, and I'm not going to get into depth, but a lot of them are engineered. And some of the people behind the color revolutions in Egypt were companies like Google, the U.S. State Department, a number of charities, National Endowment for Democracy, George Soros' Open Society Institute, the Tides Foundation, etc., to basically train young people how to create this revolution in the English language, especially. So when it's viewed from outside the Arab world, it looks like it's a genuine grassroots revolution. But really, they're just herding you from one little cage into a bigger cage. And you see this theme a lot. And we're told, oh, this is great, this is a liberation, but really, we sometimes cannot even see the bars of the cage that we are inhabiting. And I hope you'll be able to see a little bit clearer by the end of this presentation. psy-op, psychological operation. This is interesting. This was illegal in the United States up until this year. They've rescinded that law. And you can look that up. Military information support operations is normally what, let's say, the U.S. Army or the British Army do before they invade a country. They used to drop flyers out of airplanes, mass flyer drops saying, this is going to happen, you need to leave the city, or you need to overthrow your dictator, or whatever your government is. And this is very real. This is happening now. This is happening in our domestic society. That which used to happen, or we thought, overseas. Military information support operations. Believe it or not, this is not a conspiracy theory, this is a fact. There are people employed to work on social networks, to ride Facebook and Twitter, and the military runs what's called a messaging campaign. So they look for, if I post an article that goes against the ruling establishment, and some people come on my Facebook page or my website in the comment section and write something really derogatory and do a character assassination, they will then look for those comments and copy them and repeat them all over wherever this information exists on the internet. The reason they do that is to try to influence public opinion. And the easiest way to do that is obviously first to shoot the messenger. That's the easiest way, character assassination, and then they go into diversions, and try to bring it into other issues. Anything but talk about the actual issue which is being debated. It's very real. Many of you probably seen or experienced this on some level. The social engineer. Who is he? The social engineer. Basically, the whole idea of social engineering is to exploit our human nature, our emotions, through fear, preying on the fact that some people might be lazy, so that we volunteer to opt into a system. But that system's already been created for us. We're falling into a template that someone else designed. That is the essence of social engineering. And the ultimate goal is they want to change your behavior. I could do a whole 2 one-hour presentation just on these 2 bullet points. Conform to peer pressure. For the most part, we're self-policing. And I think David Icke said once when I interviewed him, he said, you only need one sheepdog to herd a whole hillside full of sheep. But humans have got it one on the sheepdog. They're the sheep and the sheepdog, like a hybrid. But peer pressure is very powerful from school right up through our adult life. Nobody wants to be seen as the odd one out. So whatever your ideas and issues that you believe in or opinions you might have, 99% of the people keep it to themselves because of that very fact. Creating your own intellectual shackles. You don't need the state to come and put shackles and a ball and chain on you, because most of the time we normally do it ourselves. And we do it ourselves out of survival, self-preservation. I just thought I'd get this out of the way. Conspiracy theorist, according to Change on Earth, nothing more than a derogatory title used to dismiss a critical thinker. And we've got a slogan that I came up with for our website, 21st Century Wire, which is conspiracy without the theory. And I try to stay away from theories as much as possible, and it's really helped me in my work to be able to back up what I'm saying and not speculate on things that I can't prove. Political correctness. This is the most important tool in the social engineer's toolbox. Now, it's essentially political correctness is therapy. It's therapy. It's cultural therapy. It's designed to conceal the world as it really is, to conceal empirical evidence of how things really are, and put a kind of nice plaster on top of it, something that won't offend people. And more 21st century society, especially in the West, there's a victim society that's kind of been created by political correctness. Everyone's a victim of something or other. And political correctness has really gained steam because of that. There's words being introduced to our lexicon that most of the time I don't even remember how it got there. And I'm going to show you some of those. Rewriting language, that's exactly what's going on. Cultural medication for the masses. So we're medicating with words. Okay, in social circles, these are some political correct terms. I'm going to show you the new term and the old term. So I was born in the early 70s, 1970, so I still remember some of the old words. Job seekers. It's unemployed. Okay? But why did they come up with job seekers? I have no idea. Unemployed is unemployed, or you're on the dole. I mean, a lot of people are on the dole. It's nothing to be ashamed of, because frankly, there are just not a lot of jobs around at the moment. Family planning. It's abortion. So some of these terms, I'm going to apologize. I hope I don't offend anybody. But these are words in yellow that we used to use in the 70s and 80s, 60s, and now it's forbidden, almost. It's seen as heresy to the establishment to use the old words. So, I used to live in San Francisco, okay, so this one's particularly relevant. Alternative lifestyles. First it was swinging, and now it's wife swapping, essentially, but not anymore. Now it's alternative lifestyles. So you have to respect that. Chemical dependency issues. Either you're an addict or you're a junkie. You know, I used to use this word. I went for the political correctness, and then I got burgled one week, and we found out who did it, and it was somebody who, you know, was a heroin user or whatever. Everybody knew the guy in town, and couldn't really do much about it. It was only a little stereo unit. But at that point, I could not call him a person with chemical dependency issues after that burglary. I don't want to say what I said, but he's a junkie. Free speech zones. This one appeared in 2004. Okay? You need a permit to protest now. You need to go to the police. You need 30 days or something, give them notice to hold a demonstration or to march, which kind of defeats the whole idea of civil disobedience or marching. But now we have free speech zones. But it's clamping down on free speech. Okay? It's not a free speech zone. Think about that bird cage I showed you earlier. That's exactly what that is. Quite clear. Caucasian. I haven't traced my genealogy past Ireland, but I don't know any white people who call themselves Caucasians. But it's a politically correct thing that you have to say, the Caucasian man, and I know the police use it and stuff like that, but really we're talking about a white guy. Now, I live in the inner city in London. I live in Brixton. So it's a very ethnically diverse, colorful part, and we have African American and Afro-Caribbean. Now, all my friends, whether they be from America or from Jamaica or from Africa, none of them call themselves Afro-Caribbean. They just say black. Okay? Now, that might be offensive to some people, but that's the way it is when you're living in the city. And I've had actually people tell me off for using these. Now, this is a big one. I spent some time on a Lakota reservation in South Dakota with a really wonderful man by the name of Russell Means, who sadly passed away a couple years ago. And I was interviewing him for a documentary. And I said Native American. Big mistake. He told me off right there. He says, don't say that. I am not a Native American. I am an Indian. And I don't know I didn't meet any Native Indians or Native Americans, I'm confused now, who called themselves Native Americans. But it's seen as politically correct. Very interesting. Geopolitical PC. This is where it gets interesting. This is where political correctness has bypassed society and gone straight to us through the media and through our government. Austerity measures. It's cuts. It's slashing programs. It's not austerity measures. Tell that to people in Greece. Public-private initiatives. I love this one. That's state asset stripping. That's selling off everything that everybody worked and paid their taxes for their whole life and generations upon generations, and selling it to a private corporation for pennies on the pound. And you will never get it back. Quantitative easing. George Osborne uses this one a lot. That's printing loads of money. And unfortunately, it devalues the currency, and it's reflected in the price of your food. And no one will raise their hand if I ask anybody, do they think food prices have not skyrocketed in the last 10 years, along with many other things? Humanitarian intervention. This is a military attack. Okay? Kinetic action. This is the latest one out of Washington. I love this one. This one wasn't working here, the humanitarian one, so they've replaced it with kinetic action. That means airstrikes and carpet bombing. When you hear kinetic action, that's exactly what they're talking about. Enemy combatant. That can be just about anybody, okay? And I know for a fact that the majority of the prisoners at Guantanamo Bay are not terrorists. There are many things, but many of them are hardly anything you would call a terrorist, and they include taxi drivers, farmers, goat herders, unemployed people, people who are in the wrong place at the wrong time, but those are enemy combatants. Extraordinary rendition, that's kidnapping, okay? And if you're unlucky enough to have that happen to you, you get enhanced interrogation. That is state-sponsored torture. That's the society that we're living in right now. This is the language that's being rammed down your throat for the last few years, okay? Here's another one. 2012 has come and gone, and everyone used this word. You heard this one a lot. Apocalypse. Apocalypse. I was thinking Bruce Willis trying to stop a meteorite that's going to destroy the Earth. But really, all you have to do is, if you were lucky enough to have Latin, anybody old enough who took Latin, you know exactly what that means. Okay, the psy-op is an event involving destruction or damage on an awesome or catastrophic scale. But the actual definition is lifting of the veil, revealing what was previously covered, okay? And so, yes, 2012, there was none of this, but I would say there was a lot of that, a lot of lifting of the veil, a lot of people coming awake in the last few years. A revelation of hidden meaning, hidden from human knowledge in an era dominated by falsehood, misconception, and deception. That is, I think, accurately describes a lot of the world we're living in now, especially in the media sphere. Okay, the Unveiling. A lot of people know a lot more about genocides, but they know that genetically modified organisms are also part of the genocide category, as are ELFs, microwaves that we're currently bathing in. These are real problems. False flag terror. It exists. It's historically documented. Operation Gladio was run by a number of European intelligence agencies and the CIA, and they culminated in the Bologna bombing. Many people died in that event, but it was blamed on a radical group at the time. We now know differently. 7/7, 9/11. You might have your opinions on that. I certainly do. Science and technology, free energy, exists. It exists, and it is being heavily suppressed. Secret societies, a lot more people know about these. Freemasonry, of course, but there's also this, common purpose. Some people might have heard of that. This is a secret society that runs within government, where you don't have to declare your membership. And most people don't really know what they're up to. Money and finance. Well, that one's been shattered in recent years. It's basically an open casino. You can do things in the city of London that you cannot do in Las Vegas. Pedophiles in power, sadly, this is an important issue, and it's a dark one. And that's about the only good thing that came out of Jimmy Savile's revelations, is that more people realize that this is real, this is happening, and more people are taking action and talking about it. Now, you familiar with this game, Monopoly? This is I didn't mean to take this slide. I was looking for the board game, but this is what they're selling the kids at the moment. Electronic banking. I love this one. Now play with millions on your card. That's great. Monopoly, it means that you control the whole board. Well, the media have a monopoly on reality, monopoly on information, monopoly on consensus. Consensus reality, of course. Most people see the world through a very narrow band of reality, which is called the BBC, CNN. And what they're doing is herding you into an intellectual cul-de-sac. I know the British have their issues with the French, but that is one of the greatest words the French ever invented. It says everything. A cul-de-sac. There's only, you go in and you best have to come out the other end. Monopoly on history. This is important. A lot of people, I talk about David Kelly. I talk about a lot of these events. Talk about, a lot of things, and people say, oh, that's just history. It's, move on. It's very important who writes history. It's very important. It's very important that we know what really happened in history. Otherwise, we are sitting there like lambs to the slaughter for the next crisis or the next false flag. And the media have a monopoly on this, as do a number of big publishing companies who write textbooks, who are teaching our kids the official version or the consensus reality version of history. That's what they get. A lot of you, or because you're here, you're obviously awakened to a lot of this stuff, and it's probably taken you half your adult life to work your way through all the programming that you've had as a young child. But wouldn't it be great if our kids didn't have to do that? UK broadcast media, daily news agenda. I'm going to shock you in a minute. The BBC and News International. Well, it is a collusion of state and media, and in the case of the BBC, it's state-run media. Controlling the news agenda? They definitely do. State-sponsored global terror. I'm not talking about Arabs and bombs. I'm talking about the information terror, making you afraid. Now, this isn't me saying this. This is Alex Thompson, chief correspondent of Channel 4, award-winning journalist. Mainstream media institutions are fragmenting. They're losing their advertising, and they're very insecure about their business model because of alternative news sources. This has led, in my view, to a profound lack of confidence, and consequently, too many news programs are chasing the same stories, the same agenda, almost in the same order, very often. I'll correct that and say all the time. Right across ITV, right across Channel 4. It's as if they all share the same office. The news agenda, legitimated by, believe it or not, the Today program. Raise your hand if you watch the Today program. This is the most influential program in the country, and I'll show you why. A senior TV news editor, who I believe worked for the BBC, but he did not give his name for this book. There's no doubt that across all newspapers, radio, and television, there's a sort of consensus that we follow. My first news hit of the day is the Today program at 6 a.m. And today was New Zealand, followed by Libya. And not surprised if it's in that order for all of us for the rest of the day. Not because they set out to do it, because it's a sort of obvious logic, if you like. Now that is how it runs. That's why you don't get any variety in your daily newscast. Now, it's the government media complex. You've heard of the military-industrial complex. This is very real. I'll take this network, MSNBC. MSNBC has hired Obama's chief advisor, David Axelrod. They've hired Robert Gibbs, press secretary. They've got George Stephanopoulos. They've got all the White House staffers, Al Sharpton, basically to protect this guy. So this is a network, a worldwide network, fully staffed with people from one political party whose job is to protect this government. That is the government news media complex. And they're all insiders. People love that. Oh, he's an insider. He must know what he's talking about. He's worked in the White House. Tale of Two Whistleblowers. We've covered this story a lot in the last couple of months. Ed Snowden. I could do a whole presentation on the NSA. I'm not going to get into it. But this is the news here. Ed Snowden, who coincidentally worked for a company called Booz Allen Hamilton, IT consultant for the NSA, who owns Booz Allen Hamilton, the Carlyle Group. The Carlyle Group is the Bush family's global military investment company. And they are the force behind the Project for a New American Century and many other things. That's who Snowden was working for. I'm not saying that Snowden has done anything nefarious, but you should know who his employers were. And this did not get in the news. General James Cartwright, the highest ranking person in history to be indicted under espionage last month. Why? Well, what Cartwright blew the whistle on is massive. Cartwright blew the whistle on Stuxnet, a super virus that the U.S. and Israel put into play to basically disrupt the Iranian civilian nuclear power program. That's what he blew the whistle to the New York Times about. Has anybody heard of General James Cartwright? No, but you have heard of Ed Snowden. And I might say all of Snowden's revelations I read 10 years earlier, just about everything, although some great details came out. And it's great that people know about it. But the media has its own agenda. Once the cat's out of the bag, they'll hang their hat on this guy, and they will not tell you about this guy. And he is equally as important. And this is the end result of the NSA revelations. Washington Post, this is 2 days ago. People are now rethinking their computing habits. People are self-censoring themselves on social networks because they know they're being watched. If it is a psy-op, the NSA leaks, it's a very effective one because it's made everyone self-policing. And it's also covered this. NSA is going through its greatest expansion in history. By 50%, they're growing. That didn't really make the news. They're not cutting back on their budgets as a result of these horrible revelations. And they're expanding in Britain, Australia, and all around the United States. They have bases all around the world. And it leads to this, the Stasi culture. This is a brilliant film, which I saw, The Lives of Others. But they interviewed Wolfgang Schmidt, a former Stasi operative. He said back in those days, we could only, in the whole of East Germany, they could only tap 40 phones at a time. If they had to open a new wiretap, they had to drop one. He said, if we had this technology, he said, wow, we wouldn't know what to do with that much information. And of course, they're not listening to everybody. They're archiving everything so that if somebody gets profiled or fingered later, they can then look down your thread and find something maybe that you said or did in 1999 or whatever, and perhaps make some sort of a case against you. That's what the NSA is all about. Modern mythologies. We haven't really progressed that much since Greek times. I would like to think we have, but we still love mythologies. Now, some of you are going to disagree with some of the stuff I'm going to show you now, okay? And it's not necessarily my opinion, but I'm telling you things that are already out there, okay? Here's one. This is a mythology. The War on Terror. You can transpose this onto the Greek mythology volumes very, very easily if you want to really replace the characters in ancient Greece with this narrative. And this event that we were shown, which seemed to have happened the way we were shown it to happen, has had a massive effect on society globally. It certainly kick-started the security state. And that's where all our money is going right now. That's why we have austerity measures, is really because of that. Okay? Billions, trillions, in fact. So, that's what it was all about, 19 hijackers. I'm not going to get into theories. I'm not going to speculate who did it and why they did it. But I am going to show you something that you probably haven't seen before. September 11th, approximately 1 mile from the WTC, there was about between 500 and 1,000 cars toasted, tires missing, burnt off, door handles on fire. Did that have anything to do with jets hitting the buildings? I don't think so. I did not come across this information until this year. And it changed. It's from a book called Where Did the Towers Go? Very interesting read. I'm not going to tell you to go buy it, but I'll say it's very interesting, and it's changed the way I've looked at 9/11. You remember this guy? Where is he now? I think we're told he was deported to the U.S. This is a mascot, okay? This is a mascot. He's from Egypt. He was a builder. He lost his hand in a building accident. Abu Hamza. A lot of people don't know that Abu Hamza, well, this is sort of documented in some places if you can read between the lines, but it's highly likely that he was an informant for the intelligence services. Okay? That's why he was never thrown in jail, and that's why he was never deported to Egypt, and that's why he was able to do really well signing on and getting housing benefit, living in a big house in Finsbury Park. So he's a mascot. The Rupert Murdoch press needs these guys to sit there and show you day after day, so that you think there is this really massive Islamic terror, radical jihadist problem in Britain. Keep you scared. He's the radical cleric. And there's a whole queue of those. They're like shark's teeth. You take one and they've got a new one for you. Now, 7/7, interesting event. I could do a whole presentation on that, but I'm not. This was on the front page of the Evening Standard, the Daily Mail, the Sun, News of the World. This is an interesting picture. This is the hijackers of 7/7, the 4 bombers going to Luton Station. Iconic, isn't it? You take a closer look at this. I saw this straight away on the front page of the Evening Standard, and I was just flabbergasted. Somehow, the bar from that gate goes right over the front of that guy. So unless he's Flat Stanley, I don't know how he managed to pull that one off. There's a close-up of it right there. They're kind of sticking it in your face there. Either it was a bad Photoshop job or what, but the point was in order to make the crime plausible, you needed to put the 4 perpetrators together in order to create the conspiracy, and they did that, and most people didn't even question it. It's amazing what people don't see. The Boston bombing, go to our website, you can see reams of evidence here. You think that might be the bomber? That's right behind the finish line, but it's not. You think these guys look shady? I've also got a photograph of them fleeing the scene after the bomb. Who are they? What are they? I don't know. But I'm pretty sure after looking at some of these things that probably the Tsarnaev brothers were not the bombers. But the FBI put their pictures on the screen and said, these are the only 2 suspects that you should be looking for, and they said, ignore everything on the internet. Someone's panicking. What happened in Boston? I don't know exactly. Overpopulation. Here's a mythology. This is amazing. This is toed out for everything from climate change to UN Agenda 21, get people off the countryside and herd them into super cities. Why? Because of this. Well, in reality, in Europe, the death rate has eclipsed the birth rate, and it has in America, North America as well. What does that tell you? It tells you in an advanced society that the population will level out. But in poor countries, people have more kids because life expectancy is lower, and there's a bunch of knock-on effects that cause people to have big families, okay? So we're told we need to do this, that, and the other because of overpopulation. Well, by keeping these countries down, like Mexico, like India, we're only exacerbating the population problem, and that is because of neocolonialism. Still a hangover from colonial days. That's a mythology. Now, some people might like this guy. I have got my questions about him. How best to capitalize on a market? Well, the easiest solution is create the market. And that market is the carbon emissions market. Al Gore started the climate exchange of Chicago in 2005. And would you believe he cashed out all his shares in 2008? And would you believe that the Chicago Climate Exchange collapsed in 2010? He walked away with, I don't know, $350 million from that deal. He didn't believe very much in his creation. His company, Blood and Gore. That's the name of the company, by the way, Blood and Gore. I didn't make that up. That's Rajendra Pachauri, who also has profited off this carbon emissions gravy train, which, thank God, is dying out a little bit. Now, I don't want to get into global warming and climate change. I will tell you I've spoken to many Nobel Prize-winning scientists. The interviews are on our channel. They've told me that the main driver of climate on this planet is the sun. That might sound like a radical idea to some people. And I was on a TV show this week, and we were talking about, the BBC said, global warming has paused. I was like, oh, thank God. And I said, so Patrick, what do you think about that? And I said, I got 2 words for the journalist who's the head of the green department at the BBC. I said, 2 words, dinosaurs and the Ice Age. I said, where were the SUVs and the coal plants during the dinosaur days? We don't know. Probably didn't have any But again, this guy, he really believes in this. He's an evangelist. And the IPCC of the UN's climate group, they really believe in it. Climate change. And everybody else has followed that. Why is that a problem? Because there's a lot of other problems that are actually threatening us. Actual threats to humanity. Back in the Victorian days, they had the poison ring. You put it on and it killed you slowly. We have these things. Our water supply. This is a real environmental threat. This is actually threatening humanity. Deepwater Horizon, the oil rig fire in the Gulf of Mexico. Horrendous disaster. Has not really been investigated properly. Fracking. Big problem. Not just because it's sucking all our water, but because they're using that to apply some of the charges to open the fracking, to get the gas out. And that stuff sticks around for 1 billion years. Depleted uranium. What is it doing? It's a waste product of the nuclear industry. Big pharma. I think this is a big problem. It's an environmental problem as well. Our water supply is full of hormones and lots of things that get flushed down our toilets. GMO will alter human DNA, according to many experts. Big Agra, Monsanto. Where are all small farmers? Microwaves, ELFs. We're the guinea pig generation. We'll find out how dangerous they are in 20 years. What's this all about? Well, would you believe that the global warming climate change movement is really heavily backed by this industry? And they've said that this is the clean alternative. Nuclear. Okay? This is a dangerous form of power, as we saw in Fukushima. And this is not a clean business by any stretch of the imagination. And it's probably, I would venture to say, as corrupt as any other major business or mafia-run waste disposal operation. And this was a big thing that came in after the Occupy movement, Robin Hood tax. So I got asked by the Occupy crowd to come down and to talk. And I said, raise your hands if you trust the government's doing everything they should do with your tax money. And no one raised their hand. I said, how many of you are in favor of the Robin Hood tax? Everybody raised their hand. The biggest slush fund in history. If you don't think they're spending your money wisely now, when they get a hold of a couple of trillion on financial transactions, do you really think that's going to go to feed the poor? It'll go to bail out the banks. It'll be a bailout auxiliary slush fund. It's another scam. This is Vegas. Greece got caught up in that. They had a choice to leave the euro. There she is, Angela Merkel. This was one of her 4 announcements that they had come to a deal to sort out the Greek debt problem. So it's been crisis after crisis, deal after deal. Where did all these crises come from? We didn't have all these problems before 1999. Greece could have left the EU. There was a lot of pressure, and people didn't want to. They believe in Europe. They believe in the EU. Cyprus is the same. Cyprus could have left the EU. They're proud to have been asked to belong into Europe. But they're stuck with the euro. And their economy caught a contagion that probably originated somewhere in Wall Street. And everyone's paying for it. Friends of Syria. With friends like this, who needs enemies? This is Hillary Clinton meeting with Saudis and the Qataris. Friends of Syria. Well, William Hague is also Friends of Syria. Oh, there's Saville. He gets around. William Hague and Hillary Clinton. It's amazing how this guy is connected with everybody. These are our friends in Syria. It's really disgusting. Killed somebody, ate his intestines on camera. This is who we want to arm. This is who we want to send weapons to in Syria, which is essentially Al-Qaeda, terrorist groups, loads of them, okay? This is Danny Dayem. He was the face of the Free Syrian Army. He was this innocent boy, and he was the go-to guy for the BBC and CNN early on. Well, he was British. And he disappeared very quickly when the outtakes of some of these guerrilla videos he was shooting, they showed that they were staging gunfire, and it was very staged and scripted. He was meeting with the Foreign Office. Was he a British agent? I don't know, but I would be very suspicious. And what they don't want you to know is that is their plan for Syria. They want to cut the country up into pieces, balkanize it, make sure it's destabilized for a long time. That'll give a nice excuse to really build up the military in that area for 20 or 30 years. Do you remember this? Joseph Kony, Kony 2012. They got the kids involved. They got the kids lobbying Washington to send troops to Uganda. They raised millions of dollars. And this is the guy that was fronting it. I forgot his name. But, yeah, massive fraud. To catch a guy that no one's seen in 7 years. They're trying to make the Bin Laden of Africa. They were going around, school kids were raising money for these guys. It was unbelievable. But once in a while you get poetic justice. Jason Russell was his name. And when this all came out, and when the people were exposing Kony 2012 as a fraud, he lost his mind a bit and was seen running around the streets of San Diego naked in the middle of traffic. And he was arrested and put under heavy sedation. And there's Obama with President Museveni from Uganda, who declared himself president for life. He's been president since 1986. And there's the wife, and there's the thing. Okay, so we know what happened about Uganda and Kony 2012. Okay, now we're getting into the Bin Laden raid. The Bin Laden raid, massive, right? This is really what this is the mythology they're trying to send you with this photo. This photo was staged. They were not watching the Bin Laden raid. Okay? That's a fact. You can look that up. So we'll watch this. This is about the Bin Laden raid. Obama won for the first time in 2008, but polls were tanking, and with the 2012 election around the corner, something needed to be done.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda.
Obama needed the narrative of the terror mastermind to come to an end and to boost his odds for re-election in 2012, but he was simply flogging a dead horse. I refer to Osama bin Laden as the busiest corpse in show business. For the last 10 years, he's been doing absolutely nothing. There's been multiple reports that he has, in fact, died. We have official sort of statement from Benazir Bhutto in 2007 on David Frost saying that Osama bin Laden was dead. Madeleine Albright admission in 2003. Musharraf in 2002 reports about him on a dialysis machine in a hospital in Dubai in 2001.
Do you think that the U.S. is going to release photographs or evidence of the fate of bin Laden, of his corpse, of the burial at sea? Do you think that would be a wise decision?
You know what? If I was a betting man, I would say that there will be no photographs and no videos released at all.
Not in our national security interests to allow those images, as has been in the past been the case, to become icons to rally opinion against the United States.
Did you see the pictures?
Yes.
What was your reaction when you saw them?
It was him.
Why haven't you released them?
I wish you'd never gotten into this. Now you're stabbing at long shots. Why don't you just get out? Take a loss, but pull out now.
I can't. I'm in too deep.
That was an interesting event. I didn't have a crystal ball. I just knew from this research I'd done that bin Laden had died many years before. So when they asked me that question, it was quite a matter-of-fact answer there. You can't take photos and videos of somebody who's not there. And this movie came out, was nominated for Oscars, Zero Dark 30. It's all about the Bin Laden raid. This never before Hollywood is really fast now. They want to absolutely hammer that nail in as fast as possible and draw a line under the event. 0 dark 30. Well, Kathryn Bigelow is the director. There she is with the Oscar. Now, she was a great filmmaker, Leni Riefenstahl, but she worked for Joseph Goebbels. But she did very well in her career because she worked for the party. And the party looked after her. She was very successful, very talented, I might add, although she's maybe using her powers for evil there. There's not a big difference between these two filmmakers, in my opinion, okay? And that's part of the government media complex. Hollywood's part of it. That's what they wanted you to think. He did it. And this is basically what you've been reduced down to, these boogeymen. You're meant to see them and be afraid of them. And the whole foreign policy and the might of the U.S. and Britain and NATO has to be mobilized to deal with these guys. That's what you're meant to believe. That keeps us on message. And if you believe that, this is the level that you're at there. That we're being reduced down to primary school level. There's no difference between the previous image and this. It's the same. And it's to get you used to that. That was introduced. We have the same in America. Threat levels, okay? And to be, excited or afraid when it's there. Okay, but I did a revision on that. So this is from the Homeland Security. I've sent this to them, but they haven't adopted it yet. Maybe one day they will. Where is the terrorist threat? Well, I shared an airplane with this guy, Jeff Lewis. Lost both legs, both arms. And we just started chatting, and I actually met him. We're going through security at Phoenix, and the TSA had him on thing, and they were unscrewing his legs and swabbing him for explosives. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was like, you've been framed or something. And I said, what the hell's going on? They do this to me every time. They even know me by name, but they still do it because they have to, because their boss told them they want to keep their job. Jeff Lewis doesn't get a waiver to go through security. He's a potential terrorist. He's a motivational speaker, by the way. He's a great guy. Right? Security waiver. Well, she gets a security waiver now. Celebrities have a special waiver, but Jeff Lewis doesn't. Who's the person that I admire most? Her or him? Well, I really going to have to say it's Jeff Lewis. The Messiah mythology. You remember before Obama was running for election? Everyone thought that it was really going to be a big thing.
We're going to spread happiness. We're going to spread freedom. Obama's going to change it. Obama's going to lead 'em. We're going to change it and rearrange it. We're going to change the world. Now's the moment where he's forced to sing. Sing with all your heart. For our children,
I can't watch any more of that. But let me say, I played that to my friend's 2-year-old, and she couldn't stop singing it. That shows you the power of these propaganda pieces. That's real. That was going on all across the country in America. It really reminds you of the Hitler Youth and everything else. And, it's well, I don't want to have my opinion on it, but indoctrinating children is pretty easy and easy target. That's his big achievement, AFRICOM, United States African Central Command. Obama has helped expand that. Of course, Bush couldn't do that job so easily, and you don't have to be a genius to figure out why, but Africa has got more U.S. military bases. They've got 2 drone bases now. That didn't exist 5 years ago. And I'm not picking on Obama because I spent the last 8 years picking on Bush, and we pretty much ran out of things to say about Bush, and thank God he left office. So the only reason I'm picking on Obama because he's president and he's carrying forward with all of the policies that were under Bush. Here's a psy-op. McLibel, Lord McAlpine, there's Philip Schofield. That was an interesting event. I don't really want to get too much in detail about it, but what it did is it made a lot of people think twice about exercising their free speech on Twitter. Okay? Turns out, Alistair McAlpine wrote this book 10 years ago called The New Machiavelli. He was a spin doctor for the Thatcher government. And this is what he said. Well, this is what the reviewer said. How to manipulate people for the greater good. McAlpine's advice on dealing with the media: spread false defeat and gain public sympathy, or false accusations, and then arrange for it to be exposed as such, so that the accuser will forever be treated with suspicion. That's from his book. That's from his book. That reminds me of what they did to this man, Steve Mesham. Hollywood's agenda. Hollywood's agenda is about reinforcing stereotypes. This is this movie called The Dictator. Unbelievable. Having lived in the Middle East, watching this, it was kind of horrific to see what the ideas they were putting across about people who were Arabic. So, psy-op recovery. It's time to recover from the psy-op. Okay? You got to get out of your comfort zone, or you have to reestablish what you think your comfort zone is. Political correctness, media language, you have to see it and know it when you see it. Do you ever wonder, everyone in the BBC sounds like a headmaster or a headmistress. It's incredible. There's a reason for that. Because they want you to feel like you're still a student. The myth of official sources. Always be skeptical when you hear official sources. Okay, selling a version of reality, history, law. However, controlled media information, every sales pitch needs a buyer. There's a simple answer to this psy-op recovery, which is don't buy it. Okay? These guys, they've got a lot to answer for. Mainly, this is a good example as any. He got the stamp of approval, and everyone was covering for him for 30, 40 years. Amazing. Amazing. And no one's been sacked. No one's been thrown in jail. Here's another trusted source. That's Wolf Blitzer. His job is to sell wars and to further propaganda for CNN. There's the timeshare salesman. There is no difference between the previous 3 slides and this slide. They're selling you a timeshare. They're selling you an information timeshare. No one buys timeshares anymore because it's a big scam. The media are there to create public opinion. Freedom fighters, rebels, terrorists, gunmen. And the object of the exercise is divide and rule. Know that you're being divided and ruled. Men versus women, gender war, race war, class warfare, rich versus poor, left, right, liberal, conservative, clash of civilizations. These are all things that have been thrust upon you that you're meant to believe. Works both ways, yes. Those of us who are awake, we've got to try to keep our infighting to a minimum. What difference does it make? I hear this a lot. Why should I care? This is an adult, grown man. Maybe he's awakened. And I have to say, for the sake of your children, that's why. Okay, forget about how hard it is to be an adult with all your stresses. Think about these guys, these kids coming up. And for God's sakes, society needs to grow up. Because if you think it's bad now, you don't want it to get any worse for this generation. I don't anyway. What kind of world do you want to live in? What kind of world do we want our children to grow up in? These are questions we need to ask ourselves when we're self-censoring ourselves or when we're afraid to talk in groups and voice our opinions. We need to really think about these questions. They're very important. It's liberating to be awake. So don't blame yourself for being depressed and feeling powerless, because the system was designed to make you feel that way. Don't blame yourself. You will have to get over it. And knowing the truth is very empowering. Doing something about it is even more empowering. It's very fulfilling. How do you want to go through life? Do I want to go through life someone says the sky is green, and I say, no, it's blue, it's blue. No, everyone else is saying it's green, and they start throwing stones at me because I'm saying it's blue. I don't want to live in a society like that. I want to live in a society where everyone can look up and say, actually, it's blue. Or, it might be cloudy and it might look ugly, but it is what it is, okay? Yeah? Okay. Anyway, I just want to wrap it up. I've got a couple of other things here, but I'm going to advance through those. You are your own media, and you can create your own blog for nothing. You don't need money, okay? Your choice. Information is power. Conspiracy without the theory. Make your own language. We did. Reconfiguring your reality. News for the waking generation. As our show on Sky PSTV, and you can see me here. You can find me here. This is a great outfit in Plymouth, the best I've ever worked with. They're called the UK Column. And I've got a new radio show, Guerrilla Media Network, starting Sundays around August 11th. That's me, and I hope you guys got something out of this, and I hope that you will, be more proactive in your news gathering and reading, and talk to people. Talk to your family, talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends. Talk about things that concern you. Don't clamp up, because that's exactly what the establishment are counting on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick Henningsen.